John Glover. Thanks for being
Hi.
here. Hi.
No, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, I mean, every single week, practically, I say, well, this arrangement was done by John Glover. John Glover wrote this. I did this project with John Glover. So it's great to put a face with the name. And, I think I'm especially excited because I've done lots of new operas and I've done lots of new stuff with you, but I don't really know what your process is. And I'm hoping you can sort of shine a light on what's going on in that demented brain of yours or any composers.
Yeah, I don't know if I know what my process is either, but um, oh, I mean, I guess yeah, we've made so many things together. I feel like my process starts. It's different for different projects. I'm a glutton for punishment, so I like to do things I don't know how to do, and learn how to do them by making them. And then once I learn how to do them, I'm like, okay, I don't want to do another thing like that again. Let's start from scratch. But I think specifically with the work that you and I have done together, or when I do vocal work, it all starts with the text, even if the text isn't completely formed when I start. Um, in a case like Lucy, which was the first project that we worked on together, Kelly Rourke wrote the libretto in a pretty full form before I started writing music. And so my musical process starts with, if I'm setting text, I start by reading the text over and over and over again. Usually I'll print out like 15 or 20 copies of the text, and I'll just sit there with it and read it over and over again and mark it up. And I have these sort of inconsistent symbols and drawings that I use to pull the text apart. And I'm looking at it from a place of like meaning, like what are the core words that have to come through really clearly? What are the sentences that really need to land the most deeply, or what statements or thoughts are the ones that I really want the audience to hear more than the others? And then, so part of it's like concept and comprehension and like what's the heart of this text. And then part of it is then going through and figuring that out from a rhythmic standpoint, like what pulse am I hearing? Where am I hearing downbeats? Where am I hearing offbeats? Where is it moving? Where is it slowing down? And so I have this weird non-consistent system of circling words and putting squares around parts of words and drawing lines between words and breaking things up to feel rhythm. And I'll kind of exhaust one page of the text that way with all these markings, and then I'll throw it away. And then I'll look at the text again with a blank piece of paper, and I'll do it again. And then I throw it away. And then I start again, and I throw it away. And I'll do that for like sometimes a week, you know. And I don't really go and look at, yeah.
Do you find
Well,
find that you are making the same markings from time to time, or is it change each time you do it? Or
it's like both. It's kind of like I try not to look back at the old versions. I try to just keep stepping forward and looking at it new again. And there are times where I've gone back to look and see where I land versus where I started. And there's things that definitely stick or stay. But there are things that also change, including like thinking about like what is the core meter of this text? Is it in 3? Is it in 4? Or is it a duple or a triple? Does it, just even things like that. Sometimes the more I spend time with the text and start new with it, I find different things in it. But there's usually a heart of it that stays the same the whole way through. And so I'd say when it's song or opera, I probably spend the majority of my time and energy on the words and like reading them and rereading them and re-understanding them. And then in that process, music comes from the back somewhere, and then the notes part comes pretty fast from doing all that homework.
wow, okay, this is interesting because I think we have this idea that composers are sitting at their computer just like writing notes and chords and stuff and just like cutting and pasting and doing, or I just don't know. And so like you're saying it comes out of living with the text. The text is you sort of inside of you at this point, and the music kind of it comes organically out of that in a way after you already have done all
Yeah,
this work of. It's kind of like, you know, and as an actor, you know, we spend all the time doing the table work and the character study and stuff, and then when you get to the point where you're staging a show, the staging happens that much more quickly if you've done the homework of who is my character, who is the person I'm playing. It sounds to me kind of like a similar process or similar situation to that in my
it
rudimentary
totally
brain.
is. It that's exactly what it is. And I think, you know, that's with vocal music, but like the same applies to like all, I think, instrumental work of mine or sound design work or any of the stuff I've done when there isn't text. There's still this period of time that is about figuring out like what is the heart of this piece, or like what is the core, like what's the thing, like what's
Right.
the thing that this piece is trying to do or get at, and you dig into that and you spend a lot of dedicated time with that, and then you feel around for a while, and then the notes, like, I mean, yes, there's all kinds of technique and canons and inversions and all the things you learn in school, and you know, harmonic, like counterpoint, and either thinking about that or not thinking about that. There's all that craft, of course, but like it's funny, like the notes tend to be like the last part of this process for me,
So you go through
even
the
when it's
same, you go through, wow, sorry, that was a mean echo that I'm hearing on your computer. Sorry. You're going through the same process even when it's a symphonic work, or even when there's no text that's being sung. It's the same,
yeah,
basically the same
yeah, I
process
haven't,
for you. Because we'll talk
yeah,
about
I
a
mean,
little bit about your sound design work for a minute, and is that how is that different than writing a symphonic piece, or how is that different than writing an opera, or how is it the same? Like how do you approach sound design versus composition, or are they the same thing to you?
I think they're similar. It depends on the project. I mean, I think there's um, I think sound design is closer to writing for like an orchestra or a large chamber ensemble, in the sense that like you have access to a lot of color and a lot of texture and timbre, and I tend to paint with a bigger brush. So like when I have written for orchestra, one of the things I love about that is you just have this sort of massive amount of resources in front of you in terms of instruments and musicians, and you can pull from that big like can of paints in all these different ways. So I tend to paint in bigger strokes, and I think sound design is the same, because sound design is you know, it's basically electronic based work, and so you could choose any sound you want, you know. So you have these sort of bigger options, but even within sound design, I would say there's differing things. Like if I'm doing sound design for like a straight theater play, then it's about making these very small, uh, impactful sonic or musical gestures that will really help propel or launch the scene and the rhythm and the pulse of it that the actors need to then get through the next, you know, 10 minutes of dialogue they might do. Like I'm usually not putting that much sound into the space, but I'm, you know, at the end of like a Shakespeare play, there's probably 15 minutes of sound that I'm actually putting out into the theater, but I've spent as much time on that 15 minutes as I would on like a 3-hour piece, because you have to really like wrestle with what do you need. And then with like an immersive theater project, with those that I've done, where sound tends to be like the glue and the through line that helps the performers with timing and pacing and energy, and also helps the audience with story and direction and intention. Those are like through composed long form electronic tracks. But I think in both cases, it's the same core project or the same core principle, which applies to all the notated music too, which is just there's a core element of storytelling, and how do I communicate the story clearly or in an interesting way. I don't know if that makes total sense.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And just to piggyback on that, so how do you think is there a difference between writing music for a concert hall versus music for the theater? Because you're talking about writing for the theater, and it sounds like your sound design stuff is very much like you said storytelling. It's like writing an opera, you're in charge of the pacing and the like the glue that is the through line of the whole piece. But like in a concert hall, you're not necessarily telling a story, or are you? Like, what's the difference between those kind of things?
I don't see it. I mean, there is some difference in the sense that the collaboration is different. In a piece of theater, whether it's opera or a musical or an immersive dance theater movement-based piece, in any of those formats, I have storytellers who are collaborators, who are central collaborators, right? So the director, the choreographer, the librettist, the singers as they're digging into their characters. Like I have all these other collaborators of which I see myself in any of those arenas. I see myself as one of the artistic voices that fits in to tell the story. So that's a very specific, that's one kind of collaboration. I think with concert work, it's still inherently a collaborative medium for me because it's about creating a work that makes the most sense for the performer or the most sense for that physical space where they perform the work. So I still don't see it as like, most of the concert work that I write, I can't perform, either because I don't play the instrument that I'm writing for, or it's for more than one instrument. And like, I can't be a string quartet. I can't be, like an
You're just
orchestra.
not trying hard enough.
So, right. So it's inherently a collaborative gesture because my score is only halfway towards the actual result of the performance. But it's a less, there's usually less collaborators involved in those projects. It's a more like either one-to-one in that it's like composer to ensemble or composer to soloist versus any of the theater work, which includes opera. There's a multiplicity of voices going on in the discussion about how the storytelling happens. So I think concert work, no matter the scale of it, is, at least on the creation side, is a little more intimate because it's usually more of a one-to-one relationship between myself and the performers. Whereas, yeah, the others there's a lot more voices in there.
So you mentioned,
I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. You mentioned collaboration, which is, I feel like I've learned a lot about collaboration from you in the work that we've done together. Because like, honestly, as a singer, this is going to sound stupid, but we're not really trained to collaborate, or I think maybe people are now, but the way I was trained, it's like you learn your parts, you show up and you do your job. And in my mind, that was not, the important thing wasn't to collaborate. The important thing was like, do your job right. Sing the right notes, sing what's on the page, and so it took me a while to learn how to actually truly collaborate with someone, and doing all this new work has helped me in that, and especially working with you and Kelly on stuff like Lucy and Guns N' Roses Cavalier and other things. So can you just talk about the importance of collaboration and maybe what you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I've always taken I think in recent history and in the conservatory schooling that I was brought up in, this idea of like the composer as king is a little bit suspect. I mean, or it has been suspect, but it was put forth as a concept that these composers are these sort of isolated geniuses, whether they're writing an opera or a string quartet or what have you. But all this music that I was studying, even like these Mozart string quartets, like half of them were written for parties, or they were written because the person commissioning it, who was a wealthy patron, loved playing the viola, and like so the viola part had to lay in a way that he would be able to pull it off. Like it's not very, very little of the repertoire that we gravitate towards or know and love was written in any kind of like an ivory tower vacuum. And so I think for me, the whole thing about collaboration is, I think I have some interesting ideas, but I'm always excited what happens when I get into a space with other people and where those ideas go. And I think in terms of composition, I perceive the notated score as the sort of shared space between all of the collaborators. So if I'm working with an orchestra, like the score, like I have my ideas about the sound and the shape of what the experience of the piece will be, and the performers are coming in trying to execute their different parts of it. And our shared space where we can have a dialogue is the score, because we both know the language of how to talk about that. We both know how to say, come in on the downbeat, or, oh, I was wrong, like take that down to mezzo forte, or take this to piano, or can we move that whole line up an octave? But that's just the shared language that we have. Me is thinking about how to shape the sound, and them is thinking about how to execute sound in the moment of performance. And this is our shared space to like negotiate like what the experience of the piece actually is. And so I always think of the score as that sort of central shared space that all the collaborators can come into. I also think of like, I don't like to hand over finished scores to be premiered. I like to hand over scores that are my best guess at a draft, but I hope that in the course of rehearsal and exploration, whether it's music rehearsal or staging rehearsals, like I hope that the score changes. I hope that we cut music, or I hope that we add 20 bars, or I hope that one of the singers says to me like, you know, this sounds terrible in this range in my voice, but if you took it down a fifth, like all this will come out super easily, and then everyone will hear it really cleanly, and I'll be like, oh, and then we'll do that, and it will sound way better, and it will get the goal, like the larger goal of what we're trying to accomplish with the music across. I'm very suspicious of any rehearsal that I walk out of, any new project. If I walk out of a first rehearsal and there's nothing to be pulling the score apart from, or there's nothing to dig into and investigate and fix, like that's a bad sign. That means
Right.
that either all the collaborators aren't as deeply engaged as they could be, or there's something about the piece that isn't letting people into it, you know, which is
I find it, yeah, totally. I find it interesting that having been a more of a sort of wearing the creator hat a little more, like and working with you and stuff, and Kelly, I feel like going back and doing like classic operas, I have a different sort of point of view now, and I treat them more as collaborations as opposed to like, well, I'm going to execute it perfectly. And it's more, I mean,
yeah,
having that mindset, and then recognizing that all this time, like the directors and conductors that I really enjoy working with, that's how they work. I just was not approaching it from that mindset. But the people I love working with, they always make it a collaboration. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. But, so I want to go back to, you mentioned the importance of the text. And I've heard you say that you can't have a good opera without a good libretto.
Yes.
That,
Yeah, I think in my experience seeing new and old opera, in my general experience, I feel like I've had a positive theatrical experience at an opera where the libretto was good and the music I didn't like, because the theatrical underpinning of it is so strong that even the music can't pull it down.
right.
And I've had positive theatrical experiences at operas where the libretto is strong, and I feel like I'm very moved by the music, and the music works really well. But I haven't ever had a positive theatrical experience at an opera where the libretto was weak or had holes and issues, but the music was really compelling. So that's just been my general experience, and what I take away from that is that you know, without that dramatic integrity and dramaturgical structure and a really solid libretto sort of holding the piece together, there's nothing that I as a composer could do to make it a good show, which means that I am not wholly, but I am largely dependent on having an excellent libretto to work with and to collaborate with on. The idea that the composer's name is always put on top is ridiculous to me. The idea that you would not list the two equally has never made sense. and I would go even further to say, like, you know, there's, like, I think about how many musical decisions I've made that have been based on the singer I'm working with, like you, or the rehearsal pianist that I'm working with before it goes to full orchestra. Like, there's so many musical decisions that get made because of other voices in the room. But yes, to go back, I sort of went off on a tangent. But
well, yeah, I mean,
yeah,
when you write
I
music,
don't
for
think
me, you have to write it just like one note, a range of like maybe a third. It has
that's
to be in
right.
4/4 time.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. And since I've never done that, we've never had a successful project.
Someday.
But no, I mean, in all seriousness, I think there's no, I think that the role of, it's getting better. And I always find it funny that I'm also out here shouting for this because I'm a composer, but like, I just, I still feel like there's an unequal weight given to the role of the composer in creating opera. And I think that we are an equal collaborator to the librettist, but I don't think that we in any way should be standing in front, because I don't think that's how the work actually gets done. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. John Glover's manifesto. No, I totally,
don't know. I mean,
yeah, I totally agree. The singer's name should be on top.
Yeah, totally put the singers on top. And I think also, I just think the text is crucial, and the dramaturgical structure is crucial. So yeah.
I want to go back a little bit to and we can cut this out. This is just me asking you this question, but you talked about how you spend time living with either the text of a piece or whatever the heart of the piece is, the thing of the piece, the idea of what you're trying, what it is you're saying with this piece. And then once you lived with it, then the music stuff sort of comes out naturally. But for those of us who do not write music, what is that like? Like, what is the germ that starts that? Is it, do you think in terms of harmony, melody, texture, is it like a cool chord progression? Or I mean, like how do you how do you write music, John?
I don't know. I mean, I think there's two parts to it. One is like, I think the bigger part of it, which is like a long-term steady practice, which is going on no matter what, is you're just, you're always listening, just constantly to either other work, or your own work, or even more importantly, I think just kind of like the world. Sounds around you, energy around you, rhythm around you, and noticing like how it makes you feel, or what you gravitate towards or what you don't gravitate towards, or what and how those different sounds are engaging your mind and your heart in different ways. And I think you just actively listen all the time, and you try to, in a soft way, take notice of what your mind keeps coming back to, or what you continually are interested in hearing, whether it's a rhythm or a texture or a density, or a beautiful C7 chord that comes out of a wind chime on your neighbor's porch. I think that all this is I think that's like practicing scales, or doing vocal warm-ups, or doing etudes. Like, I think for a composer, that's that, and you have to be constantly engaged in that. And then in the actual writing of like a specific piece, it's hard to say. It seems like the first thing I have to get my head around is like what the sound of the piece is, like what the kind of core sonic just soul of it is. And I guess that's probably, it lives somewhere between harmony and rhythm. Sometimes it's harmonic gestures first, sometimes it's a rhythmic impulse first. I think very rarely, although I do like really hooky tunes and I try to use them where I can, it's usually not a catchy melodic riff first, although sometimes it is. but I guess the vague and specific answer to your question is, it's like there's just a sonic core to each piece, and you kind of have to, you spend time kind of trying to find that. And once you kind of get at it, then you can start expanding out from it and making a lot of mistakes and then correcting them. And I used to think I was crazy for thinking like that. And then a collaborator pointed out to me at one point that Verdi actually talked about that each opera that he wrote had a, like, he had to first find the tinta, or like the color of that opera. And until he found the color of it, he couldn't write it. And so I used to think I was nuts for this issue of like, oh, I can't just sit down and write a melody and then like do a counter melody and then, you know, go from there. But I guess apparently there's at least one other person who feels that way.
Turns out you're just like Verdi, John.
Yeah, right. But yeah, it's somewhere between harmony and rhythm and like energy. Like, you just start from there. It's also weird, you don't know what will lead to what. Sometimes you end up with like 5 toys in the toy box, and you're in love with 3 of them, and you take the other 2 away. Like, you've got a great melody and this fantastic underpinning of like a bass line and a harmonic progression and maybe some kind of like other orchestrational vibe you're putting in there, and you all 3 of them you think are perfect, and you've taken the other 2 away, and then like you wrestle with them for a while, and then you realize that one of them is actually messing with the others, and you take that out, and then you put something back in. Like, it kind of happens like that.
That is amazing.
I don't know how to explain.
No, I mean,
but I think it's like doing anything. You just keep trying. Like, it's like doing anything. You just keep picking at it and keep trying until, and it, you know, hopefully it gets better.
So I ask this to everyone because I am a singer, and you work with singers often. You also work with instrumentalists. So what would you say is uniquely challenging or uniquely rewarding about working with singers?
I think that what's uniquely challenging about working with singers, I'll start there, we'll get that out of the way.
Yeah.
Is that I find it,
it's gonna take a while.
Right, the next 20 minutes we'll talk about this. No, I mean, there's only actually one thing that I found uniquely challenging to vocalists compared to a lot of other instrumentalists or types of musicians that I've worked with, which is, for some reason, and this is a generalization, but for some reason, a lot of singers will give me false information about what they can and can't do. And I don't think they're doing it on purpose. But I think a lot of singers, for whatever reason, will say like, oh, but I can't, you know, this part of my voice just never go there, or can't go to this part of my voice unless you approach it this way. And it's this weird thing where sometimes I'll like really pay attention to those things, and I'll be like, okay, got it. And I'll do that. And then I'll hand them like a stretch of the score, and they'll be like, this is not singable. I can't do this. And I'm like, well, I approached it exactly the way you said you wanted me to get to this note and whatever. And then they're like, well, but could we do this instead? And they'll give me another passage or way, or like, it'd be easier if I just jump up there, or it'd be easier if I just jump right down to that note. I'm like, oh, and in my mind, I think that's exactly what you told me you would never be able to do and would be impossible. Interesting. And I don't say that as a criticism, but I think it just speaks to the fact that what is so rewarding about working with singers and unique and exciting about it is that I think singers are and I don't know what your actual process is, but it seems to me when I get into a rehearsal space with singers, they are tackling story, timbre, color, character, basic musicianship issues of pulse and tempo and timing dramatic impulse and physical energy and stamina. Like they're actually tracking and navigating all of them all at the same time from their first rehearsal. That's what it seems like to me. And so, whereas in the abstract, it's easy to say like, oh, well, if you want me to go up to this high E, you can't just not prepare me for it. You have to prepare me in this way or with this approach. And you're like, okay. But then when they're suddenly looking at it in the context of whatever the drama is, or whatever the story is, or whatever the vowel sound is, or whatever the word is, or whatever part of the sentence it's on, let alone where it is in the piece and where they're at energetically or stamina-wise or emotionally, suddenly all the rules change. Like, oh, actually, it's easier for me to just get there,
right.
Or it's easier for me to. So it's like, it seems like a challenge unique to singers, but the reason for it is one of the reasons that I like working with singers so much. Is I love that we can grab at all these different elements of storytelling and sound and energy at the same time, like, and that we can play with all those levels at the same time in different ways.
My acting teacher used to call that divided consciousness, and that she said singers are really good at this, and that she worked with a lot of singers in her acting class, and the techniques that she taught were sort of fit into that mold really well, where you could think of your character in ways that would be like, you know, another layer of whatever it is you're doing. You know, there's the notes and rhythms layer, like you're saying, the basic musicianship level layer. There's the character layer. There's the, you know, all these different layers, and thinking of that way was really helpful to me in my development. And I think it's true that we do have a lot that we just are tracking in any given moment. And I am definitely guilty of what you said about like spreading false information about myself to you and other people. But I think a part of that, I sort of feel like, you know, we're constantly, well, first of all, we never hear our own instrument unless it's recorded. You know, we never hear it as it truly is. It's inside of our bodies. We're constantly being told what to do and how to do it and how not to do it by a sea of different people, coaches, conductors, voice teachers. And so I think that a lot of, I'm speaking for myself here, I think a lot of like what I think about what I can and can't do is wrapped up in what I think I should do, what I think I should be able to do. And, you know, I should be able to sing a pianissimo note in my passaggio, but I know that it's not my strong suit. So my default is going to be to tell you that I can't do it. And then you write it. And then in the middle of the opera, I have to do it. And then I'm like, oh, well, I guess I can do it. I guess I lied. Granted, it's not going to be, like, this goes back to like Ben Crywatts and his, the one and only perfect sound versus the ugly but useful sound. Like, I think we're programmed to want to make the one and only perfect sound at all times. And once you embrace making the ugly but useful sound, turns out you can do a lot more than you maybe thought you could.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, the other thing that I'm hearing when you say that is another thing that I love about writing music in general, and more, I should say more specifically, and maybe this is my genre, writing music that I can't play, you know, writing writing music that I can't perform, by which I mean like writing, you know, a lot of, if you think about the idea of writing music for large forces or groups of people, like I can write a song for soprano and piano, like I can never perform that. I need other collaborators to do that. And one of the things that is exciting about that kind of process, as opposed to creating music that I can perform myself, is that from the beginning of the writing process all the way to getting it into a performance, it is in a constant state of discovery. You know, there's constantly, there isn't ever a fixed thing to just get perfect. There's a larger goal of the show itself or the work itself, but everything going towards that performance is constantly in a state of discovery. Like me finding out that I always write for you in this certain range of your voice and it works fine, except in this one moment it doesn't. Like, why? Don't know.
Right.
But or the same with just like timbral colors, like different voices and how they blend when you have multiple voices together. And so I think that constant state of discovery from beginning to performance is another thing that's exciting about working with vocalists particularly. It's true with all musicians, but it does seem to happen more in like an operatic or a theatrical context. Yeah.
Is there something that, I mean, we've talked a lot about this over the course of this conversation, but the fact that we don't really know your process very much. You know, we don't, you hand us a score and like, it just magically appears. And then we're like already, first of all, we're counting our lines, see how, you know, oh, where's my high note? Where's my aria? You know, that we're going through the process of like, what do I have to do now to learn this? But, is there something that you wished singers or anyone knew about the craft of composition that we maybe don't know?
It's not as hard as I think people try to think that it is. Like, it's not actually a mystery. It's not. I think it's like it's a sort of, to go back to the beginning of the conversation or early in the conversation. Like, I think there's to write music. There's the constant work of just listening and noticing how that listening makes you feel, or where it directs you, or how it informs your emotional and your mental states, and what you're drawn to and what you're not drawn to. And that's the bulk of the work. And then there's a piece of the work that is just like putting notes down on paper and moving them around and trying until it sounds the way you want it to sound. But it's not like, yes, there's craft and there's technique that you can study. And those are very useful tools, and they can make you more efficient. And they are important, but ultimately, I don't think writing music is, it's not really a mysterious like voodoo witchcraft. It's just listening a lot and then trying over and over again until you get closer to what it is you want it to sound like.
I'm going to remember that the next time we do an opera together and you give me the score.
Yeah.
and I'll be like, well, it wasn't like it was hard to write this, John.
Right. I mean, it takes time.
Oh, this is so great. I love like getting into the weeds about like how this stuff gets put together. Is there any project that you're working on that you want to talk about? I mean, we have some things that we had been working on that are been postponed, but
there is I mean, I think I would love to say something about the project we were working on that is being postponed, which was just because it touches so much on another thing that I love about singers, which is that you guys work with this part of your body that is so tiny and invisible, and it makes you guys like superhuman, because this sound comes out of you that without like you're not holding an instrument, you're not holding an object. Your whole instrument is something that comes out of you as a person, and I think that is just so inspiring. So there's a project that we've been working on that you've been in the development of, which is commissioned from On-Site Opera for an immersive project that's all an a cappella opera, which would have premiered initially. I think we would have premiered it this fall, but that'll be postponed for a later date. But the score and the development process has happened. That's been a really rewarding project to create an immersive a cappella opera. Has been an exciting one. And then I think things I'm working on now, I guess one is in like formative steps. We've been workshopping it for a while, is called The Collector of Ocean Beach. And it is turning into an oral long form podcast work by myself and Aaron Bregman, who's a playwright and librettist. And there's one actress and one pianist, and we're building this sort of long form, sonically driven podcast work. We're still not sure exactly what form it's going to take. We've been workshopping it for a little while, and that'll start coming out, I think, in the fall.
Oh, cool.
We're building it over the summer. A recent thing that I did was a very short collaboration with an immersive theater maker, Kelly Bartnick, which was called In My Room, which was when both of us were experiencing quarantine in Brooklyn in our separate apartments, hearing sirens every day, hearing the 7 o'clock clap every night. I've done sound design for immersive theater works for her for a number of years, and one day she just sent me this video draft of a performance she made in her bedroom, and asked if I wanted to make sound for it, and I just did, and it was actually the first sound that I made since we went into this moment that we're still in, because for a while I didn't really feel like making any sound.
Right.
So that was a fun project.
That is a beautiful project, and I'd actually like to play that at the end of the show.
Yeah.
So people can get a look at it, because it's
totally
really spectacular.
And then the other one that's still in this is in early form. American Opera Project is supporting the development of a sort of music theater operatic adaptation of a work by Dana Spiotta called Eat the Document, which you know very well. So we're in the early days. We've workshopped different elements of it. You've workshopped many elements of it. We have AOP on to develop it, and we're looking for sort of where the end goal of it is, but I think Kelly and I are going to probably write a lot of it this summer. It seems like a good time. The book is about, that moment, as you know, that sort of looking at the 70s and the 90s in America, and these two different moments, one very socially engaged protests, all the things happening in the 70s, things like the Weather Underground, and then comparing that against the 90s of this sort of malaise and comfort of, well, we all have enough money and credit cards, so like, do we really need to get involved? And investigating, like, what does it mean to be a socially and civically engaged person when you're not satisfied with the world and the government and the society you see around you. So it seems like a good time to make a piece about that.
Yeah. Yes. I can't wait to hear. I mean, I've loved the stuff that I've gotten to do from that, and I can't wait to see where you guys take that, because there's just so much there.
Yeah, I think, and then the last one that's going to happen this summer is Adam Tendler, who's a fantastic pianist and a dear friend, has commissioned a series of works in memory of his father. So we're all, as a group of us of composers, are all discussing his relationship. His father passed away, and we're all having specific dialogues with him about his father and about who he was as a person, and Adam's relationship with him, and each of us is being invited in a different way, and then creating our own solo works for Adam that he'll put together into some kind of program. We're not sure exactly what that will look like when it all comes together, but I think it's a great example of, like, my favorite projects are the ones that are personal, or the ones where I'm directly connecting with the people that I'm writing for and with. So that, which tends to be the case for all the things I'm working on right now. So
that's amazing. This is so great. I just want to keep talking all day long, but I think I'm going to move on to the Fauci 5. It's a very important part of the show. The world wants to know these answers to these questions. Yes. Okay. Do you have a favorite opera, or maybe an opera you think is underrated?
I think I have a lot of favorites. I think my favorite probably is still Fanciulla del West, Puccini, because, and it's for a cheap reason, it's sentimental in a way. I mean, first of all, the music is amazing, and there are so many elements of the story that are fascinating. The heroine is neither a saint nor a whore. She lives in that middle place, which is not true for most Italian opera of that era. For female figures, it's a deeply interesting and complex character. And it's the first professional musical experience I ever had, was singing in the chorus for that show at Glimmerglass. So it's like there's no way for me to not fall in love with that music every time I hear it. So many personal discoveries, musical and socially, just friends, colleagues, like all happened in that score. So it's hard not to love it.
Yeah. I totally get that. I have those same ones too. Do you have a like maybe a book or a resource about opera or music that you could recommend?
Yeah, there's a great, one of my favorite books about music is called Where the Heart Beats, which is a book about John Cage and about his life and his work, but it's written from the perspective of a Buddhist Zen practitioner named Kay Larson. So I like it because it's a book about an important and deeply inspiring musician who has changed a lot of how we think about music, but it's not written by a musicologist or a music historian. It's written by someone who's deeply knowledgeable about music, but the principles of Zen Buddhism were huge for John Cage in his work and in his life. And I love, it's like there's plenty of books about tone rows, and there's plenty of books about, you know, the musical theory behind his stuff, but I love that book because it looks at his work as an artist through this philosophy that was hugely important to him. And so it's interesting to read about a music maker from that perspective.
Yeah, that's awesome. Any book that you've read recently
cool.
that you can recommend?
I
know you don't know how to read.
I don't know how to read, but I kind of sound it out. It's a slow process. I would say I'm in the middle of Fugitive Days right now, which is a memoir by Bill Ayers, who is a member of the Weather Underground. And so part of that is for more understanding around this project with Eat the Document, but also like he's a phenomenal writer, and writing about his experiences and specifically the way he talks about memory is really interesting. And then, so yeah, I'm halfway, I guess that's the one I would say. I'm not finished with it yet. I'm halfway through it. That's probably the one. Yeah.
What are you doing to stay sane right now or to stay creative since we're all canceled?
Yeah. I'm running more, which is good. That's helpful.
Yeah.
On the creative side, I'm taking pseudo piano lessons from my friend Adam. Every week he sends me a piece and I record it. I learn it and then I send him a recording of it, even if I mess it up. And then that dictates what piece of music he sends me the next week. I fell off the rails for about a week and a half there, like any good piano student should. Right. But I'm getting back on the wagon now. So it's been helpful to have that as a kind of a practice and as a dialogue with somebody that I like a lot.
Cool. We had I gave you a guitar lesson a month ago or so.
You did give me a guitar lesson.
I forgot about
that. I fell off the wheels of that. I have to catch back up to that one. I do have my guitar with me. I know. I do know the chords. I know 4 chords, and
that's all you need
I have
know.
like. I know, but I still can't move very quickly between them. It's like a solid 4 count before I can get to the next chord reliably.
I remember that stage.
Yeah,
that's kind of where I'm at with the songs that I'm learning for the next 2 shows. That's the stage I'm in.
Oh, good.
So the most important question here: what are you watching on Netflix right now, or whatever streaming platform you happen to subscribe to?
I see. Though I'm not currently watching anything because where I am now living, I don't have internet I have internet stable enough for email and Zooming, but not really for streaming. But what I was watching until very recently, I watched Schitt's Creek for probably like the fifth time, you know. And then the other one that I watched recently, which was sort of amazing and horrific, was the reality dating show Love Is Blind. I don't know if you've seen this.
No.
Oh, okay. Well, I stumbled on it like right after we went into quarantine, and I found it to be very hilarious and therapeutic. The concept is that like 10 men and 10 women go into this like place, and they're separated, and each day they have dates with each other, but they're in these pods and they're isolated from each other and they can't see each other. They can only hear each other, and they have to decide in like a week and a half. They can have dates with as many different people as they want, but they can't see each other. And then at some point they have to decide whether they're going to propose to someone or not. And then if they do propose and the other one accepts, then they get to see each other. And then they get to go on a honeymoon for a week. And then you find out whether they actually, and they have to get married by the end of the show. So basically they have to like fall in love with each other without seeing each other. It's terrible. Like, this show is terrible.
Sounds amazing.
The concept of like being in isolation and physically separated from someone while you decided whether you'd marry them or not felt very resonant to me. Yeah, it felt pretty resonant in April.
Yeah.
So I can't help it. Like, there's something about terrible, well done, terrible reality TV.
Listen, we are watching a lot of that here. Like, shouldn't even admit it, but like, we're hooked on this show on Disney Plus called Wicked Tuna, and it's these tuna fishermen in North Carolina, and it's the same every week. Like, they catch a tuna and they put it on their boat, and then they go and sell it, and it's nothing changes, but we can't stop watching it.
Yeah, there's like a thing happening there that keeps it addictive. I'm trying to avoid television shows or movies where people hug each other or kiss each other, because it's just like it's difficult to watch.
Yeah. It is like, oh my gosh, they're too close to each other. Get away.
You're too close. You're too close. That's what's so comforting about Love Is Blind. They're not close at all. I mean, they have to really make this decision. They're really following all of Cuomo's guidelines, you know, until they decide to cohabitate. They're doing all of it. They don't wear face masks, but I think it's okay.
Oh man.
I guess the other one, I would say the last movie I watched, which was a movie I'd watched when it came out, but I rewatched it just last week, is Roma, which I love that movie so much.
That was beautiful.
Yeah, I can't get enough of that movie. I think I've probably watched it 4 or 5 times by now. Just like the attention to sound and visual. It's so good. It's so good. Yeah.
Well, I cannot thank you enough for everything. Your friendship, your music writing, let me sing all your stuff on this silly show, doing this chat with me today. I appreciate all of it. So thank you so much.
No, thank you, Andy. It's one of the great pleasures of life is knowing you.
Oh,
it's true.
Your check is in the mail.
Oh, great.
For 79 cents. No.
I did wear my Genghis Barbie t-shirt, by the way.
Yes, I can't see it. Oh, there it is. Awesome. I did notice that earlier.
Yeah. Seems thematically appropriate.
Totally. I should have worn mine. The other day, Annika and I were both wearing our Genghis Barbie t-shirts, and we were like, yeah, Barbie's rock. Anyway, have a great day, and have a great summer of writing music.